Hello, this is a Rafa Borderlands 4 Golden Gun build guide. I'm going to start us off with just a little demonstration on the target dummy here. Basically, this is a build that is using the special effects of the Golden Gun along with Rafa's ammo regen ability to keep shooting forever and do a lot of damage. You'll note that it has a little bit of a startup time, especially with recoil and handling issues. But once you're through that, you do a ton of damage. And if we give it just a second to see the DPS ramp up, we should be doing about 1 million DPS. And that is with Soldado not procced. So if we let this run, and then we proc Soldado on one of these other target dummies, now it should be closer to 1.5 million DPS. A little bit more, actually, more like 1.7. So let's go through the build and I'll show you how it all works. All right, so we're using the Golden Gun, or the Golden God gun. The gimmick to this gun is that it's a COV gun, but instead of overheating, it just keeps using more and more ammo. However, since we're playing Rafa, we can use Rafa's ammo regen perks to not really need to worry about that downside at all. So let's go through the skill build, and then we'll go back to the gear later. So most important part to get this to work, you need points in the thrill, or rather Las Yaras for the ammo regen. And that's what's going to allow us to keep firing the Golden Gun even when we run out of ammo. The thrill is nice just for extra fire rate. And then we use El Centro to deal with the handling issues. So this ramps up over time and gives us eventually pinpoint accurate firing. And then finally in Blue Tree, we use Jock for extra overdrive bonuses because most of our skills here are overdrive skills. And then Deadline because it's a great source of fire rate, which is the main stat that we end up missing on this build. So in general, if you could pick up any stat at equal weighting, fire rate is going to be the most useful. Then in the rest of the build, we're using Red Tree because this is largely a sort of generalist, but also mobbing focused build. We do want to get to 2 points in Soldado so that we have very high overdrive bonuses. So that requires us to spend 26 points in the Red Tree. Deft Hands is the best because, as I said, fire rate is our most important stat. So even though CTR is more gun damage than fire rate, because we already have so much gun damage, the fire rate's better. Huerga is super useful just for keeping up action skill. And then we're going to use Instinto because it's also effective for keeping up action skill, especially during mobbing. Then El Valiente for up to 60% because of the doubling bonus to all of our damage. And this is just additive with most of our other damage sources, but it's still a pretty big chunk. And then the last 2 points we need in top tree are pretty much whatever you want them to be. I like Resiliencia just for some defense. You could put them in CTR for a little bit of extra damage. Shield Barrierist if you want to sort of make sure El Valiente is up a little more frequently. But whatever you choose is fine. Then to get down to Soldado, Barrage we like because even though Golden God doesn't really splash, it still counts as splash damage, so it gets this bonus. And then Temerario is our strongest source of extra gun damage. It does have the downside of causing handling issues, but we solved that with El Centro over in Blue Tree. And then Soldado basically just improves all of our skills a ton. Specializations wise, again, you have a few options. Now with Caffeine is always great just to keep up action skill. If you're going pure damage, the strongest option is in the zone, but you do need to be aiming down sights. This is going to end up being 25% gun damage and 25% crit damage, but the crit damage actually gets doubled because of the way crit damage works in Borderlands 4. Riddle you this is 50%. We're going to stack this trivially easily. And then best defense is 30% damage when full. There's a little flexibility here. You could also use Bullet Train for being able to shoot while sprinting. I like this for just anything that involves running around. In general, I would prefer that to in the zone because I don't feel like we usually need the damage. And then you could switch best defense for potentially CQC if you're willing to throw a Slippy and use that to keep CQC up because 30% fire rate is significantly better than 30% damage here. You could also use Bullets of Scared or some other defensive option. But yeah, this is generally the setup that I like to run. And I think we don't really need the extra sort of min-maxing of damage from CQC and in the zone most of the time. Although I will use it in the zone generally for bossing. Okay, so over to the gear itself. Golden Gun, what are you looking for? Most important is just a high base damage stat. So I have 4 different Golden Guns here. Generally, kinetic is nice to just not have to switch because I guess sort of let's go through the gimmick of the Golden Gun. So the way it works is as you keep shooting, it ramps up its damage. And that damage is in the on-shot category. So it's the same as, for example, Rafa's charging lance bonus from El Soldado. That's why El Soldado, which is normally a very strong Rafa skill, is not actually that important here. Although you could still use it if you want to run a lance version of this build. I just generally think that the handling cost and the sort of annoyance of dealing with lance, especially if you go down, is not worth the cost there. And that takes up to 30 shots while overheated to shoot up. So again, there's a little bit of ramp up time. In general, if you're bossing, you want to sort of start shooting before you actually get into the boss arena. Yeah, so you're looking for high damage, and then it always has the legendary perk, the COV, and the Ripper Max, so you only get 1 potential slot for a licensed accessory. I think Jacobs is generally the most all-around useful. If you want more single-target DPS, an SMG Daedalus swap would be the best. And you could also consider using a Hyperion accuracy while firing if the recoil on the sort of startup is really bothering you. So that's the gun. I just have sort of 4 different versions. My kinetic is the best. I've also got a rad, a corrosive, and a fire. As for the rest of the gear, triple bypass, almost always just a good all-around option. But you can use any rep kit you feel like. If you'd rather have a kill spring or something like that, you can use a kill spring. You could use a accelerator order rep kit, which I generally like for bossing because it lets you sort of cycle through more quickly. For the ordnance, again, doesn't really matter that much. I just have a throwing knife because that's what I have with Deadeye on it. You could use a Slippy. I would recommend a low-level Slippy if you can get one so that you don't accidentally kill yourself with it if you're using that to proc CQC. Dancer is the best class mod for many Rafa builds, but this one in particular, you're looking for +1 to Soldado, +5 to Temerario, and +1 to the Thrill. And I like action skill duration because it makes it easier to keep your action skill up. And especially for the Ordonite Processor event, it makes it a lot easier to sort of keep your action skill going while you hit the lever again in order to not need to deal with the ramp up period again. I can try and show that later in the video. Watts for dinner, generally best shield here. You could use something like a super soldier for fire rate if you felt like it. But I like a Siphon Watts, helps you keep overshield up. You're a little more survivable. You probably want a triple Siphon. I don't have one, so I just have Evasive for a little extra move speed. Amp is not going to be super useful in this build because you're shooting so fast. You just don't have a way to keep it up. And then enhancement slot. So duct tape is sort of the most critical part of your enhancement. It gives you 100% crit chance while you're overheating, which is the entire time you're shooting the Golden God. That's kind of what makes this build tick. It triggers Querga to keep action skill up, and it's also just a big damage boost. For other things you're looking for, if you can get a legendary with Smelter, that's another 35% fire rate, which again is our most important stat. Slightly better than that is a shotgun fire rate, which is 37.5%. Gun damage, shotgun damage, those are the types of things you're looking for. I think probably best in slot would be duct tape, Smelter, shotgun fire rate, and gun fire rate, although there's a chance I would need to run the math, and it'll depend on sort of how exactly you're set up, that shotgun damage would be better than generic gun fire rate. For firmware, 3 Deadeye, pretty much mandatory now that it works with all crits, including duct tape crits. That's just an extra 100% crit damage total. You can always keep the Deadeye 3 up. I like High Cal 3, just the projectile speed is useful, and this is on shot gun damage, not on hit gun damage, which we already have a lot of, but it's nice to have a little bit more. Other things you could consider, bullets to spare 1 for 5 fire rate is probably about comparable to the 10% gun damage here. But in general, sort of the extra firmware options aren't that important here. You can use God Killer for bossing if you felt like it, but it's not a multiplier, so there's nothing else that good. The things that you think might be good include Bullets to Spare 3, which does not work with COV weapons. And then I believe Oscar Mike 2 also does not work with COV weapons. So those are out. And that's pretty much the whole build. So let's get into an Ordonite processor. I'm going to do a True UVH 6 Ordonite processor just to demonstrate this. If all you wanted was the build guide, that's it. Feel free to tune this out. And thanks for watching. So I guess as we go through this, generally what I'm trying to do is find the ones with the canisters and then just grab them and throw them in as quick as possible. Because if you don't find them right away, they can get a little bit tougher to grab, especially if you accidentally shoot them super far away. And if you can, try to grab an extra in between. It's not always possible, but if you're slow getting the last one, you can actually hold one in between the 3, 5, 7. And as for the Ordonite enemies, yeah, they take a little bit to go down, but it's not too bad if you shoot the crystals, and with Jacobs, you're still hitting everything else. Oops, went down there. Not the end of the world. Probably should actually kill King Croesus there. I do wish they would add a separate keybind for grapple and melee, so I don't look like an idiot punching the air when I'm trying to grab the canisters, but... Oh, there's 2 back there, huh? Yeah, and so see, like that, you can sometimes you'll have an extra one. And yeah, as you can see, once you've been doing this for a while, the recoil issue is just completely solved. We now have just a pinpoint laser that does a ton of damage. This actually has been a little bit on the slow side for me. And I've gone down twice, which is not great. I find that often I'm done with around a minute 30 to spare. But here we'll only have like 30 seconds left by the time we kill the 3rd boss, which is still manageable. And the other thing to look out for is you want to try and keep your action skill as close to full as possible at the end. Oh, I need to actually throw this in. Oops. Thought I'd already hit it already. But And that potentially allows you to hit the lever another time before your action skill runs out so that you don't have to deal with the wrap up. Hopefully I can demonstrate that here. Yeah, you just hit the event again. And then you still have enough action skill bar left to use instead, though, to start getting it back up before the event's over. All right, I'm going to cut off the recording there, but thanks for watching.